Hi, I'm Stephen Carson coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri in these United States. Let's see. Oh, I know what I haven't mentioned in a while. How about please share with friends and like the videos on Twitter and YouTube. Really appreciate it. Obviously, we cover a lot of topics that are not cool in popular culture, but there are some people who find these things interesting, and the ones who find it interesting are more likely to know other people who would find this interesting. So we rely on the kindness of our friends here to word of mouth for this channel. Okay, so support for the channel is gratefully received at Subscribestar. Allows me to pay my graphic designer, cover other costs associated with the channel, order books when I need them, and things like that. Okay, so thank you. Let's now bring on Black Horse. Hello.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. And every so often, you being Canadian is relevant to what we're actually talking about. I think this is one of those times, but I don't want to be too limiting because there, as we'll see, there's a number of people who would find this topic interesting. You don't have to be Canadian or from Detroit, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that happened. This is a piece of history and a piece of sort of industrial history that incidentally involves Canada, but most of the people and places we're going to talk about today are American. So,
right, yeah,
but
yeah.
But before we get into that, I guess we've got we've got the mini story off the top.
Yeah, let's bring that up. And this is something you and I were talking about, which is the much fabled, flight of manufacturing. It all went to China because of free trade agreements, and now we don't make anything here anymore. Some comments, sir.
Yeah, so I wanted to highlight this. I saw this pass on Twitter, and I wanted to highlight this to this audience, uh, mostly because it illustrates that the narrative of globalization as a result of the Reagan Revolution ending American manufacturing is not entirely accurate. American manufacturing as a share of global manufacturing had been in secular decline for a long time for
Hmm.
quite a number of reasons. Not that changes in NAFTA or changes in the trade agreement with China had nothing to do with it, but you're looking at a much longer running trend,
Yeah.
one that has a lot to do with the reindustrialization of regions of the world that were destroyed by the Second World War, but
Mm-hmm.
also one to do that has to do with a much broader sort of globalize a much broader leveraging out of U.S. manufacturing business than is sort of commonly understood.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like part of what you're talking about is not when you talk about the relative share, that doesn't mean that we're not making things here anymore. It means it could mean we're making things and now they're making things too, right?
Yeah, and so
Which is
like if you look
a
at
different story than we're usually pitched. That sort of the extreme sort of the people who really push hard for tariffs and stuff
yeah,
is that they took our manufacturing away. We don't make things anymore. They make things over there. We don't make things, right?
yeah, and certainly if you look at the stretch between 1945 and 1980, a lot of that is the reindustrialization of the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the deindustrialization of the United States.
Right.
But anyways, when we when you encounter a piece of recalcitrant data like this, I just think it's important for people to take on board um, that the story that is told by the sort of, I don't know, almost union boss America is not an
Mm-hmm.
entirely fair representation of what actually happened here.
Right. And just to be clear, what you're looking at, it can be hard on people's phones and stuff. They might see the line, but not see the heading. This is the decline in manufacturing sector's share of total U.S. employment. And that is also something you have to put in some context, right? Because as we know with agriculture, less people being involved in the industry doesn't necessarily mean you're producing less, because capital investment means that fewer people can be just as productive as many people working in the sector were in the past, or potentially way more productive
Yeah,
than the many hands, say in agriculture, which was basically the entire population of America at one time, or 90% of it, or something like that, a couple hundred years ago, and now we have 2% of the population. Um, well, number one, that's a percentage of a population that's grown, so that's not absolute numbers. But anyway, we have a small percentage of the population, very small percentage of the population involved in agriculture. And I bet you they're producing more agriculture than we were in, 1820 or something, right?
yeah, yeah.
So
Anyways,
same with manufacturing. The declining percentage of U.S. Americans working in the sector doesn't tell you we don't make things here. It might mean we make lots of things with fewer people, right?
well, and the other thing that's worth pointing out here is that actually in the years since the financial crisis, this dynamic has stabilized.
Mm.
Uh,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, right. Yeah, look down at the bottom. It's down, 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 and then it's still down a little bit over the last 20, I'm sorry, decade or so, but not, it's not diving as,
not
it's sort of
significantly.
flattening out a little bit more. Yeah. Huh. What does
So,
that mean? Black horse? Explain it to
well,
us.
so we've talked about this trend in other contexts, but re- the Trump tariffs are part of this that began in sort of 2016, 2018. But they're uh, domestic manufacturing is in a better position now than it has been in quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is it's no longer losing the competitive dynamic anyway.
Right. Okay, so even though this was meant as sort of a small story before we get into our main story, it's not unrelated to our main story, which has to do with American manufacturing. North American manufacturing, I guess I should say, right?
Yeah. So this is a dynamic that I first encountered when reading about the U.S. Civil War. So
Mm,
one of the common dynamics you hear about when you read about the U.S. Civil War is that the North had a vastly disproportionate share of key war industries,
yeah.
everything from railroads to arms manufacture to naval manufacture. And when I first encountered this, I thought it was very interesting because the South had large concentrations of capital. And so, all things being equal, it seemed as though uh, this dynamic, let's put it this way, this dynamic was not obvious
Hmm.
from, you've got a very wealthy export driven economy in the South. It's not obvious why there shouldn't be any industries there. And so I was quite curious. And what I discovered is that there's a uh, not very well understood, but quite profound history of the development of the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes region, and to a lesser extent, New York State, uh, that explains the pattern of distribution of U.S. industry really in the period beginning in the 1820s through to maybe 1980, but
Hmm.
still active today to some degree.
Right.
And to illustrate the continuance of that dynamic, if you flip to our first slide here, this is how defense procurement looked circa 1940. So this is from a newspaper article in 1940, how the War Department sees the country,
Yeah, and
and it
if it's hard to see, this is one of those maps where the size of the state is related to some statistic, right? In this case, how much war material they're getting from the state, right? So it shows Missouri as this sliver, for example. Alabama as this sliver. That is not the shape of those states. It's just showing them as small to illustrate that they didn't contribute that much. Whereas New York State, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Delaware, all are quite large. New Jersey are all quite large or outsized, even, right?
yeah, I mean you could squint a little bit and see the Rust Belt with like Massachusetts and Connecticut stacked onto it,
Mm-hmm.
if you
Right.
wanted to. Um, so you can see that the dynamic that existed circa 1860 still exists circa 1940, and is still kind of the dominant mode for manufacturing in the country. So most of this video will explore why that is, and
Mm-hmm.
how the geographic factors that created this dynamic should influence the way that we understand manufacturing economies and resource economies more generally.
Yeah, and just to tie it into the history, we this is 1940, right? So it's right as the U.S. right before the U.S. enters World War II. But as you already mentioned, this would be a key factor in the war between the states and in World War One, where I believe the U.S. also was able to produce quite a bit of war material, right?
Yeah, the map you're looking at tells you where the majority of material on the Allied side in World War One and World War Two was produced, right?
Oh, so
So
not just the majority of this is showing you where we produce in America, but you're saying America through these states produced most of the war material for the Allied side in both wars.
yeah,
I'm not sure I knew
so
that. Most? Really?
yes, but
Wow.
many of much of it purchased, um, but certainly like this the steel and heavy equipment that was used on the Allied side was in majority produced using this system.
Gotcha. All right. So, why? What is going on here?
So there is a unique set of, if we flip to the next slide here, there's a unique set of geography um, that plays into this. So for most industrial concerns um, that are relevant to warfare, the steel industry, the heavy equipment industry, tool and die, um, artillery manufacturing, transport costs are a dominant factor in cost of production. And so the kind of transport routes that are available between the raw material resources dictate how these industries arrange themselves in peacetime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you have a unique geography supplemented by the building of some canals that made the Great Lakes region uh, just the most efficient place in the entire world to produce steel, basically from 1830 through to today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you can see the watershed here. Um, the two pieces most people wouldn't assume uh, through Chicago. There are canals which connect Lake Michigan out to the Mississippi River watershed. So
Yeah, and
manufactured goods from this region of the country can be distributed throughout the Midwest.
and by the way, while I was visiting Chicago recently, one of our Old Glory Club members was touring me around, and he was showing that one of the things that the early explorers did, I think Pere Marquette and shoot, forgot the other guy's name. Anyway, two guys were mapping waterways and this whole area, uh, not just the Chicago area, but well down into the Missouri River system. They thought it was key way back then that there was a mile between the Great Lakes and where you could hook into the Mississippi River system. And they were like, this seems significant. Sure enough,
Yeah,
someone built canals, connected up I don't know when it happened, right? But probably by
in the early 19th
1820, yeah,
in the early
early
19th century.
yeah, someone connected it up, solved that problem, and now you can go from this whole system that Black Horse is describing to us down into I think the Illinois River. That would be which connects in turn a place we often visit, by the way, where Grafton, Illinois, where the Illinois River connects into the Mississippi River system, and so off you go down all the way to New Orleans from there.
And equally through upstate New York, you can connect through a system of canals into uh, into the Hudson River and find your way down to New Jersey.
Okay,
Um,
I see.
so this is how steel from places like Pittsburgh uh, would arrive at shipyards on the East Coast.
Hmm.
So uh, theoretically, it could have gone out the St. Lawrence waterways, but that's politically unfavorable. So it went via canal system instead.
Hmm.
So if we flip over here,
Yeah.
we've got a picture of the shipping routes here that dominate, and so it starts to get you a picture of what this system looked like. Uh, the red lines here are iron ore, and you can see iron ore is being shipped from the lakehead in Lake Superior down through to its use in northern Ohio, northern Pennsylvania. And you can see in blue coal,
Hmm.
principally for the rail that was part of opening the Midwest, shipping going in the opposite direction using the
Mm.
same shipping routes.